Welcome to you. Another beautiful episode. Dr. David Jubb, The Universe Inside Our Mind, live at 5. In case you were wondering, the name of that song, as far as I know, is called Spirit. And if you've been following, if you've been listening, if you're listening, the song itself, actually, when you sing it, calls forth this energy, right? And this is inside you. Eye awareness was the topic yesterday. Who knows what will be the topic today? Until Dr. Jubb joins us on the air here, I'm going to get into a little bit of what I know best, which is life food preparation. Our feature recipe is what we call the King of New York. Of course, we use Jubb's Irish sea moss as our number one ingredient. But in the King of New York recipe, we also got lemon or orange. And we sweeten that with honey, throw a little Celtic sea salt, and blend it all up until you have a cream, right? Delicious cream. You're going to have that blender filled about halfway with this cream. Then you're going to add sodium bicarbonate, which is going to make it expand. That's why you need room in the blender there. Once it expands, you add ice, and you got your quote-unquote Italian icy. Acts like a scrubbing bubbles. We use it on Jubb's 14-day LifeFood nutritional fast to help, stay empty. We've been talking about emptiness. Dr. Jubb has been teaching about emptiness, and as we learned, the vestibular sense is the first sense to form, so that means that the body comes before the mind, and if we want to have an empty mind, we go for the empty body. And the body that we all share is here. Dr. Jubb, thanks again, mate. Really looking forward to the program.
Oh, yeah, good, mate. It's really great to be here. Cambo's here, and he's been researching just a couple of topics. I just would love him to share a couple of topics today. Go ahead, Cam.
There was a story in the UK where the Pied Piper of the sick and the young is making all the headlines, even though he's long dead. He is said to have abused up to 300 victims who have now come forward. And that story is spreading like wildfire. It's being linked to a possible paedophile ring amongst the political class, running up to number 10. So that's something David will touch upon in a moment, mate.
Wow.
You there, mate?
So, what class was that?
The Parliament and number 10, so the political class. Now there's rumours of there being various paedophile rings in that community as well. Yeah. It's a story that's always been there or thereabouts. Do you remember the film Eyes Wide Shut, mate?
Yes.
by Stanley Kubrick.
Mm-hmm. He's supposedly the guy who... Yeah.
So he died on the last day of making the film. And he completed his work on the film. He died. Some coincidence. Theorists may say it's a coincidence. Others may speculate on something else. Also, in Greece, we all know there's been quite a bit of social unrest in Greece, right, mate?
Mm-hmm.
Probably seen that on the news. The first impression I had was people were, there was a backlash against the regime there for their austerity measures and kowtowing to the German regime and the funders and the bankers. Now there's stories coming out that the unrest is amongst the people, like anarchists and immigrants versus nationalists, and so now the people are fighting each other as opposed to presenting any kind of united front against the regime that they all seem to be seriously annoyed with. All right, mate? So that's another story. It's popped out today. And I'm just going to hand you over to David, who's raring to go.
All right. Thank you, Cam. Good stuff.
So, I think just the social commentary about the news of the day. Any other news items, mate? And then I think we might just have a little bit of social commentary. Anything else come up there that you've had a look at? Was there any burning issue that you've really been, that just got you going?
There's a person who ordered about 10 pounds of Jubb's Irish sea moss, and they wanted to know, how can we live more in the wild?
Okay, well, Irish moss is sustainable, and it really is sustainable, and it has all the nutrients of the ocean. Most all the nutrients have sort of really washed a lot into the ocean. The ancient Atlanteans settled a port called Carrageenan in Ireland, and that's one of the very oldest first ports. And they brought with them the wisdom of this gorgeous sea vegetable. And to this very day, right there, they even call this Irish moss. So amazing. But the ancient mariners knew that they could preserve and keep and suspend things and stop it from coagulating and make more colloids of things and cream, and it had such an enormous nutritional value, but that their mariners could easily survive well and truly off these sea vegetable and things, and they could their intestinal tracts would produce all the omega-6, omega and vitamin C and everything, Yeah. So Irish moss really has taurine in it, which for vegetarians, that's amazing, because a lot of vegetarianism could mean just junk food vegetarianism for mostly, or soggy cardboard eaters, yeah. But anyway, so I really recommend that people can have more magnesium, of course, and everything that's in the Irish moss is in its uncooked, unheated state, and the element in it is in its monatomic form, so that all the atoms are smaller than a 9-atom cluster, and that makes them useful, whereas a lot of things are not at all. See, but you've got such a rich array, and you've got 2,000 times the calcium to phosphorus, so it's sort of a food which can assist to help to reverse all the superphosphate that's put on the earth and the superphosphate that's got into food and things, you see. Yeah. Does that make sense, Doogie?
Amazing, yeah.
Now, we've got a good sound today, mate.
Sounds good.
Okay, really tell me anytime as soon as the sound. I really care very much. Our sound is really good. But But anyway, of course, Cam's story, of course, which is the story that's put over the earth at the moment, really is a story which really is about what social sort of versus what, and then having a social sort of beingness versus being disinhibited, Could we say that really? But then, first of all, of course, Cam's story is where the news item is that the male he's being talked about, and he's the subject matter, right? Could we characterize him in this story, whoever that is, all over the earth, of course? He has to be the subject matter in woollyhood, and the travesty really is, for the stock, if they have an idea of that, is sort of a splitness a bit, so people won't necessarily really be able to be their whole self, you know what I mean? But these things really have to really perpetuate a non-gender egalitarianism, to work properly. Yeah. So it's very important that the hand above the government would really do everything they could so that the person's story itself wouldn't protect, but just continuously sort of like do the embedded command stuff, you know what I mean? So if I said to you, Lukey, don't have a lot of fun with this over the next few days, I mean, I'm talking about you having a lot of fun with this over the next few days, you know what I mean? But I remember my teacher saying to me, you know what, the more that you start practicing these things, the more that you're teaching them, and you're teaching really what you're learning the most yourself, right? And you're really, really right on the forefront with the things actually that you're saying. Don't we really know it that lots of people in history have been judged afterward to be innocent? And in a court system, which really anybody would go through, isn't that just like if somebody is being considered to be a witch, perhaps, because the Village Voice, if you look at the back of it, women really don't feel quite right about all of the butts and the breasts and things sort of being shown like that with the little black stripes. But there's pages and pages and pages and pages and pages, and it's sort of like women really can't stand that, but that they can't stand that she's really being paid, for some sexual fetish and her sexual addiction, and that she can have the job in entertainment or politics, with that's her job, and apparently there's a great weakness, and then apparently people are doing that, and then the women are really upset very much because it's sort of like a cheapening of things for themselves in the way that they feel about themselves, of course. But that this really is sort of what Samson and Delilah story really is all about, But the news of the males as the subject matter talked about only, so when somebody gives you their schooling, isn't it amazing if they've come underneath Tavistock at all, they're going to just sort of only put his beingness as far as the subject matter talked about, like, for instance, Julian Assange. All that's really talked about is him being a subject matter, that's all. But the object of desire, I think one is sort of in Israel somewhere, perhaps. I'm not sure. I don't know where the other one is, but there's no victim at all, you see. Of course, there certainly is. Julian Assange, he's being held as a victim, you see, of a phantom where there is no victim, And the captain of the ship could just order that because there really is no constitution there, in England. None at all, really. Because there's no money to support that, you see. And people really have been excited just to give the ability to a private person just to run everything for them, and they've fallen in love with the master, and that's sort of called cognitive dissonance. And then a lot of these people sort of really are mirroring things back to themselves sort of like that, But in this story, sort of, the female sort of is the object of desire, and this is sort of all about Samson and Delilah, you see. And this is the second oldest story in the Bible. The first oldest story really is about food and procreation. And then the next is really about creating an armed prostitute to commit legalized sin for society, and that's what sort of Samson and Delilah is sort of about, So he has to dress down, and he has to marry down, and he has to look down, and he has to support somebody younger sort of thing. And then he's the mature one, apparently. But in a lot of these situations, I mean, here you've got a person who really kind of been involved in politics, and you've got somebody that was involved in entertainment, perhaps, and things. And that could have meant that person really was loveless. They actually were doing loveless work, because most people actually, when you ask them, just normally, most people really love to be with their family. You know what I mean? And so when somebody's really not with their family, like if you just take 300 male gorillas and you just sort of all put them in the zoo, it's sort of a bit weird. It's really weird. There's actually like a social order of things, and you just can't escape but all of their insanity. And then we really do have to have compassion very much. But if thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of hours are spent by her having a sexual addiction sort of satisfied and being paid for that, as all those ads show, and then there's somebody that's really involved. I think that actually when you ask all the people who actually are put into their behaviour sort of stopped or something, that's called pry son, not pry daughter, in English. And who do you find in there but the sons? You're not finding the daughters in there. No, because it's a sexually rigged paradigm, you see. It's and that's has to be purposely created, to get an armed prostitute, because a person's body has to be worth less than the property that they defend, So you've got people as males, really, and they have to guard over rings, and those rings could be, half a year's wages or something, given as a gift. But if you look in the magazines, it might be just a small watch or something, but it's really not half a year's wages, certainly not, But somebody has to be sold, you see, in the paradigm, and that's the travesty for the stock, you see, across where the plantation is, except for maybe 5 countries on the earth. But in that woollyhoodedness or bullyhoodedness, which is sort of like a bully or a woolly, but one's a bully and one's a woollyhood, but they're all just sort of bit woollyhooded, sort of Zionist sort of plotedness, But if you've got somebody above and they just are the count, then, it's sort of like smoke screen and stuff, that person does. But you're just one person, as David Icke and, let's see, who else? Alex Jones, yes, and other people really do a very, very good job, basically, and a bit of entertainment and things thrown in too. It's a polarized version, it has to be sort of put, and not really spoken about, you know what I mean? But that polarized version is sort of like Beauty and Beast, you know what I mean? And these things sort of are not supposed to be really spoken about, but you've got people like Bunny Broiler, and they're making sort of fun of things which are just sort of ordinarily body language, unspoken stuff, but if you do that, then out of place sort of thing, But when somebody goes to stand into an elevator, you know what I mean, there's a place you sort of got to go stand, You shouldn't be sort of be going and standing next to someone that's there when there's plenty of space. And so there's sort of an idea of what we're supposed to do sort of socially, But when people really are naked in themselves, all of the silliness has disappeared, and studies do show that. But to really create the silliness and the immaturity, you have to have sort of sheltered workshops, that are all over the place, like these ashrams and everywhere, and other places too, which are a bit like that. They're very, very immature, and they don't really have any teachings about sexuality, none at all, and they certainly don't have any teachings about procreation, really, or natural, ways to be. Those things really are forbidden in those ashrams sort of thing, you know what I mean? And they must really do everything they can to separate people too, because when they look outside, there's sort of a bit of a caste system, and they judge everything. And so nobody wants to come back as something very useful, but the insects certainly are useful, and so is everything else in the native tradition. Not any one thing is higher than another, and over there where they have that caste system and stuff and being supportive of it and not really saying anything about it, you know what I mean? That's a bit silly, but the persons and people who really get the grand poopah of all of it, which we really have to stand back in awe about it, is the banker, it's the count, and so the count really pays for all the laws and everything, and that's the count, you see. And the count story really is this Beauty and Beast, because from the stock you've sort of got to have a story to create prostitutes to commit legalised sin, and be about stories and stopping that and things. And so their behaviour, it's very important by the hand of government to make sure the boys' behaviour is always about arresting other people's behaviour, or other males being arrested, basically, and then putting it like that, like as an embedded command and thing, because that was what was done by your mum, and others to the boys, sort of thing, But the worst thing that might have been said to her was, I wonder who will marry you, you know what I mean? Because that's a big concern to them, because they've got to catch a man, sort of thing, But these things sort of are really about gender egalitarianism, and what's social versus what's where people have social disinhibition, you see. But where something just becomes an elbow, so the organs are just simply just the same as an ear or an eye or anything else, and there's sort of no special significance at all. And then that's sort of normal, basically. But we live in a sort of a vagina-less era, because in New York City they had a show, for instance, called The Body, and I think there might have been like 800 bodies in the exhibit, and I think there might have been 797 or something, I don't know. Mostly they were all males' bodies, and it's right next to the building where all the ACS women work, and there's like over 900 of them, or 1,000. They just sort of, or more, they just sort of all get hired, and so they were all hot going to work, like brand new, back there in 2007, and that's when the Body exhibition was going on. And the curator was asked why there wasn't any women in it, and it was said that it would have sexualised the show, you know what I mean? But that on the outside of the building you've got penises, all around the outside, and they're sort of like sexually mutilated kind of thing, because they're basically equivalent to that. And then you've got statues, of sexually mutilated males, and you've got little boys put like that, for grandma on her card, but not grandpa, I mean, this is a sexually rigged paradigm, and it guarantees when money doesn't come in the door, it sort of stops love going. It causes love really to go out the window, really, but it creates a paradigm of that, you know what I mean? But what's forbidden, which that's what Samson and Delilah is about, he had to be stripped, to be a slave, and his body not really accorded the same value, and so his hair cut and things, and something had to be taken from his side, and so she becomes covered, and that's sort of the nice paradigm to create a sickness, in the person. To call it, and also it's a beautiful paradigm if you really from the fertility cult, because it's sort of that's the paradigm they created these matriarchal societies to cause a sexual slave, and that's sort of what it is, sort of thing, sort of as a sexual slave. Anyway, but things sort of have to have been sort of created, if you could see that. That was a very deep sickness, and people spent a lot of money on hollow points and things, and they bought them all up, like 400,000 or something, I mean, what are they doing with that? I mean, isn't it 5 times more that they're really, in every way, they're sort of spending actually in other things, I mean, that's sort of the travesty, isn't it? But it's a sexually rigged paradigm, and that's a precognitive commitment that's sort of set, But eventually, of course, just over a little bit of time, all these things sort of become just a bit like an elbow, and even people will tell you that it's like that sort of committing incest or something, because those are people just lying in bed and they feel about each other just as their family members, just fully, and that's not anything of a nature such, of any excitedness at all. It's just simply empty to be, and that's normal and natural the world over, basically. But you could, to get somebody just to be fatherless and father away, the better, you see, to create an armed prostitute. And everything that's mal, must be equal to bad, and phonetically things not formed properly. And fem really is sort of equivalent to feeling, and emptiness more to be. Whereas mal in English, the Arabs and everybody point out, sort of really is phonetic, or something not really having formed Lukey. But everybody knows that the trained dog salivating just to the bell ring and Pavlov's conditioning happening to create Beauty and Beast. And apparently, there's been lots of evidence of people doing that to have people that they sacrificed, even like young boys in the past, and they tortured them and did all sorts of things, and it was sort of a big hoopla, and that's what they do in the press, you see. And so it's very important that they do what they can to cause the male's image to be continued to be sort of considered as a beast, you see. And of course he's an angel, and then but that's the words in the suit that put on him is as a beast, sort of, because an instrument of unhappiness has to be thrust into his hands quickly, and that's to shoot another boy or something, or a bear on TV or something, and anybody who would say anything else, it's not really easy for them, really, except like films like Nemo that came out of Australia, But most of the films for kids and stuff is really, really shocking, because it's done by white upper-class males, like young ones, and their really brains have been roughed, so they don't even know they're acting like jackass in the world at all, they're very social disinhibited. But in America, if you just look at males, some people are easily able, to have touched their pee-pee sort of in public, sort of thing, and some mothers of some races allow their young boys to touch their pee-pees in public, but the black and Hispanic mothers love their boys to have just touched their pee-pees in public, and they don't ever say anything about that at all, and so then you really will see a lot of that around, and that's sort of acceptable even on TV, football and that sort of thing, people continuously able to, the males, young boys there, touching their crotch and things, and that's sort of like a social disinhibition sort of thing, but she's not allowed to do that, So these sort of really is a gender egalitarianism where it's supposed to be, of course, but these things that are done to people are sort of stereotypes, and that's to control people and cause people to just only other than meet in their souls, but actually just sort of like a role, you know what I mean? And all they can do is repeat and the story of the role, and they have embedded commands, and it's sort of like pornography, because the persons in the story are powerless, right? And then their powerlessness is perfectly being undermined. So it's sort of a witch's trial, because everybody knows certainly there's no constitutional money to support any constitutional remedy, and absolutely you'd consider an enormous amount of retaliation in a case like this, because it's politics, you know what I mean? And also sort of it's involving a circle of some people that sort of only act as puppets, because they can only do that sort of as a puppet, because most of them, if people on the earth really are loving and they're really caring much to be sort of with their family, and that's love's work, and sort of otherwise it's sort of the Lone Ranger isn't sort of really what most people sort of want to do, But I think the world is very prudish, and most people would agree. And a lot of these people are very, very embarrassed in their nakedness and ashamed in their nakedness, and that's a shame too, for her to have to carry all of that, and for him. But that we're living in a vagina-less era, so that's not anything in any public statue, But his body is allowed to be this way, you see, because and he can't really know that, And that's the story of the emperor without clothes, but it's not the empress without her clothes, and everybody's laughing. It's him. He's got his shirt off all the time, and that's really nice for her, But it's really weird for her. Of course, it's weird for him, all the behaviour of the coveredness, because we really care very much about supporting whistleblowers, If anybody actually did something and it was official misconduct, I mean, in anything that apparently was leaked somewhere there, that Bradley Manning has been only alleged to have been involved with or something, he hasn't said anything. And can somebody have a mind if you don't let them sleep? And what have you got after that? I mean, really, what have you got after that? You see, is that a phantom that's done that, or could somebody just explain the logic of it? I'd just like to know. You know what I mean? But was there anything in that material that actually was official misconduct? Was there misconduct? I mean, I don't know that people have really been acting callously and not acting lovingly, or that things could have been poisonous sort of compounds and things put into, a toothpaste and all sorts of stuff, which a lot of people in the natural movement feel a lot of that stuff is really toxic. In a sexually rigged indiscretion or discretion, you see, if he could just be paid and that was his lot, and he had some fetish, and the tables were turned, so we would strip her to be half naked and kick her out to be in the cold and put her into blue, and she'd be sexually mutilated in America, like he is, and it would be, if something's not formed properly, it would be formalformed. And every time you ever heard that in any other language, of course, that you came here and you would hear this, and it would be like, if something's not formed properly, sort of like formalformed. I don't know if women would really care for that much, especially if it would be to be put to death. They'd call it the death clitorality rather than the death penality, But to hear these things phonetically and the meaning of it can't be shaken from at all. If you can see what I mean, you have to feel light in your body, you see. But if village boys, women certainly are paid to satisfy sexual fetish, and there's pages, and it's an enormous business apparently, and that's what's going on. But where's the advertisements for him, for her? I mean, there certainly is beginning to be shows that she goes to that's the same. But isn't the world sort of really, really prudish, unbelievably? I think vast majority of people would certainly agree that the world is far more prudish, and certainly these politicians and other people in the entertainment industry, they can sometimes really have to be holding a conservative line of things, and in some countries, of course, it's abhorrent, the practices of discrimination, allowed discrimination, where we would never discriminate against a person on their orientation necessarily. but that people could really be still punished as sort of like witches, But that's what's really going on to males, because it's all males sort of. And then the vast majority of them in Christ's Son, when you survey them, they say they're innocent, and no crimes that happen to them are ever reported, basically. I mean, surveys show that. They don't report crime, but the only people that report crime are typically sort of more younger females and things, and they're the ones that actually really report crime. But that I know that a lot of that is being used to control, and then they duke boy people. You see, everybody knows what it means to be duke boyed, and then you have Texas oversteppers, where you've got a village or something of 300 people or something, a community or something, and all the children get taken from their parents, and then everybody's told, let's not have any more of these stories about that, you know what I mean? But they'll spend an enormous amount of money discrediting Bill Clinton, but then he's an amazing person, and all these people are sort of amazing people, really, honest to God. People should be just left alone, really. But I think that, but they're not, are they? Because if you just put 300 males together in gorillas, what's going to happen after that? But the people who then looked at what occurred as some females were brought to the gorillas, they wrote about that, but they never wrote about the unnatural condition of the 300 gorillas. Isn't that amazing? They just sort of forgot that or something, I think that's pretty amazing. But that's the sort of thing which I'm really caring for us to be considerate of today in our program. But I think that people like David Icke and Alex Jones can be bringing attention. But isn't it really just simply the hand above the government owning the growth of money supply and people just having a laugh at? And then after that, you've just got a mess, right? It's just a big style mess, you see. But they could be doing all sorts of things which the stories, certainly in Woollyhood, are full of what I'm just sharing with you. Go ahead and do a little bit of a study, but certainly he must be the subject matter, in the story, because you can't really sort of have any feelings about him. Hundreds and hundreds could be killed, but it's not going to hold your attention. But if you just have one woman in jeopardy, in the beginning sort of thing or somewhere, that's going to hold the audience attention sort of thing. And so that's how it sort of had to be, and that's what happens. That's what the story of Samson and Delilah is about. But why you're not hearing this in church, you know what I mean? Isn't that amazing? So that's interesting to me. I think it's really funny. But anyway, you certainly can, Lukey, we could all agree, people are all trained to salivate, just a bit like dogs to the bell, you know what I mean? That's Pavlov, and Beauty and Beast is the way to go, you know what I mean? But sexually, what's forbidden really is what's sexual, because if it's not forbidden, it's sort of really not sexual sort of thing, and I've been in plenty of situations where young nurses have easily been able to see an erection sort of thing, and that's been sort of just left to be, but that I don't think I've ever seen the situation of the reverse of that, actually, but I've been in hospitals and situations, and I just observed to see how males are treated versus females, you know what I mean? And that's a very, very sexually rigged world. And then in the 70s I saw males, and they just fled teaching in droves, so there's none left. And how easy is it, you know what I mean? You just have to point your finger at a witch, and that's it. And because there is no legal remedy to clear up discrimination when you're being discriminated against and certainly retaliated against radically, and don't all of these people actually say to you that that's actually what's occurred? So everybody knows that the process sucks. It really sucks. There is no judicial system at the moment, and that sucks, you see. So shouldn't there be a moratorium, for 1 year, which means breathing space? Everybody just tick the box you want reform in the judicial system, and there should be no more trials or anything for 1 year. honest to God, really. But that, any issues that relate to children should be cleared up and that sort of thing, really, especially to be brought back to their loved ones. There really needs to be an overhaul, but only this can happen as a result of a moratorium, and that's just tick the box you want reform in the judicial system, but just tick the box you want reform in banking. That's all. So simple. But everywhere you ask anybody all over the earth, they say yes. They certainly say yes. They don't need to really be educated. They're just sort of like our monkeys, all of us. We just really can feel the effect of something, and so that's called faith validity. But I think somebody came out and they said that there really wasn't any long-term studies that absolutely show how harmful synthetics are. And that's a pretty nice message, isn't it? Because it's all about how harmful synthetics are. And even though the person said there's no long-term studies that show how harmful, isn't that amazing, synthetics are? And I think that was a pretty good message. But anyway, it's really what's forbidden sort of is what's erotic, and if something is sort of uncovered, then it's no longer sort of forbidden, and then it sort of really loses its sort of value, But it only can really hold its value as long as it's all sort of hidden and covered up and what have you and that sort of thing. And it is amazing that we do live in a world it's called the Vagina-less era. That's what the natives call this for the white Wasichu's paradigm. And it's like a white upper class female having been done. That's what the natives say, and because they put their own social mores over everything. But even their own culture, the natives, wasn't sort of related necessarily to all this polarizedness at all. But that was really more an extended family. But that's not sort of what the nuclear family is about, and the missionaries were teaching nuclear family stuff, which is really, really horrific, That's not natural, not at all. Extended family is much more. But and that's where people really grow up in bondedness with each other more, and everybody shows how beautiful that is. But if you isolate, separate, and you mutilate, and you differentiate by instruments of unhappiness in his hand, instrument generative form in hers, and then you don't educate anybody about this. I mean, who have you had a conversation with about this, Lukey?
Just you, Doc.
Oh, isn't that amazing? Wow, isn't that incredible? But it starts to even get a little bit boring after a while, the conversation that's happening out there, unless it's really talking about things more deeply, you know what I mean? But it simply is really the travesty of the stock that everybody's owned, and they don't even own their own airspace, and everybody just is sort of, has fallen in love with the idea of that, but it's not really true that everybody's fallen in love with that, because there's an enormous amount of people that just not voting, and that's sort of making the news, mostly all through out people's voices, as they're looking at things that's happened here over the many years. The pattern has been just more and more disenfranchisement, but isn't that exactly what the travesty of the stock sort of is designed to do, sort of thing, Because isn't that sort of how you divide and conquer and sort of control? Stockholm syndrome is sort of having fallen in love with that. That's called cognitive dissonance. But in Sweden, you've got people not even knowing who's in charge, who is. It's just a bit of a phantom, and fiction. And where's the victim in Julian Assange's situation, And didn't somebody have a bit of fun? I don't know. Apparently they didn't. But is it socially acceptable for her to say she had a lot of fun? Would he be protected or would she be protected? I think she's protected. He's underprotected. But the idea that a politician who is powerless, put to be without family, but and that's a male that you're talking about there.